Hey there, what's up? Today's going to be a nice chill video, and I'm going to show you something that is pretty amazing, and it's the reason that money actually does grow on trees. Now, I'm sure we've all grew up, heard money doesn't grow on trees, but the crazy thing is, money first off literally is made of trees. Say what you want about the gold and the reserve and all these things, but money, to me, grows on trees, and the thing is, nature is the only thing that's regenerative. And here's the cool thing, like there's all these products in the world that are made every day, and they get thrown out and destroyed. We buy TVs and then maybe we sell them, or we just toss them in the trash, or whatever the things are, and just things get wasted and wasted and wasted. But nature, there's no waste in nature. It's just this regenerative, recyclical thing. Now, as humans come in, we found ways to create waste. Now, there are things you can do, like recycle bottles, and of course you can go to the recycling center, although I've heard mixed things about whether anything is actually really being recycled. But like I took this bottle, kombucha bottle, I drilled holes in the top of it, and now I use it as a watering can. Sometimes I open it if I want to pour, or I go here and I can sprinkle out a nice, this is like for seed stuff, I can just give it a little zippy dippy dippy, right? And it's nice and gentle on the plants, because when they're young, they're very vulnerable. But here's the thing. Money does grow on trees. And what I mean by that is you can literally grow a tomato, and tomato grows, you get a bunch of tomatoes you get to eat, you save a few tomatoes, you save the seeds, and then next year you have seeds to grow more tomatoes. So one tomato gives you a plethora of seeds, which then gives you many, many, many more tomatoes, and so on and so forth. All the foliage from the tomato plant, the green, and the leaves, that all eventually breaks down. You can compost that, and you have more fertilizer for the following year. One of the reasons that I got chickens, of course we get the eggs, but a lot of people don't realize that the manure is gold. So you feed chickens scraps, and we go dumpster diving a lot, and I get all these amazing organic produce and lettuce and different things. I feed the chicken scraps and leftovers from our food, and then they poop, and then they make, eventually you turn that into fertilizer, and you have this great fertilizer for your garden. So there's this reciprocal process. I used to help out at this place called Harlequins in Boulder, and it's a great spot to get plants and things like that, as well as Masa. They have this Masa has an amazing seed bank. Harlequins has a great just selection of all these incredible plants. And working with Gary at Harlequins and working with Rich at Masa, they're just like plant masters. They know so much, and I learned so much. And when I was working at Harlequins, I was helping out with the wholesale stuff, and we were taking a lot of plants and we would repot them and bump them up. Basically what bumping up means is taking a plant, that they start here in these little seed cells, and sometimes I'll start plants in these small seed cells because you can get a ton at once, and sometimes I'll start them in ones a bit bigger, because they'll have more time to grow in here. You don't have to bump them up as often. So it really depends on your situation, what you have access to. Most of these things that I've gotten recycled and reused. If you go to a plant store, sometimes they'll give you all these containers with your stuff. I always save everything, always reuse everything. So when you plant stuff in these containers like Schmau, you have all this stuff, at some point you need to bump them up. And one thing you'll see here, if you look at, there's 3 tomatoes right there, right? And as they get bigger, as they start to get their first true 2 leaves, okay, we'll show you this here. Let's see. I never know what's going to happen. I'm just winging this. So look at these tomatoes here. They have planted 3 seeds. They all sprouted. And these leaves right here are not their true leaves. They're just kind of the first leaves that pop up that just give the plant some ability to actually exist. And then you start to see these true leaves. So if I were to flash forward to another plant, maybe, let's see, a bigger tomato, you can see those 2 true leaves have gotten much bigger. So first off, if you're ever going to replant these, never pull from the stem. You pull from the leaves, but specifically pull from these leaves. If you're trying to get this out very gently, but if these get damaged, it's not a big deal. But if the stem gets damaged, it's kind of game over. And this all depends on the plant, but general rule, all plants are different, but they often share similarities. So what's cool that I started really learning it working at some of these places is that I can drop these. I have these 3 tomato plants right here, right? I'll show you again. And oftentimes they'll say, okay, look at the one that looks the strongest, cut or gently pull out the other 2. and get rid of them, and then just keep the strongest. So what people tend to do with seeding is they plant a lot, and then they look to see which ones are the most robust, and then they kind of thin out, which is like basically thinning out, getting rid of the ones that are smaller. But what I learned at a lot of these places, a lot of plants, and tomatoes are a good example, is if you're careful, once they have a decent root structure, you can separate those into 3 tomatoes. So I want to give you an example. People usually do that in pots, but I want to show you what I do with things that are actually grown into these planters. So you can do the same thing. I seeded a ton of cilantro. I have too much cilantro. So my goal is to take a few of these out. I could just thin them out and, as they say, weed them. I don't love that term weeding. It just doesn't sound right. But I could just thin them all out, weed them out, and then save a few, and then the big ones get bigger. But what I like to do is actually take some of these, very carefully pull them up by their roots, and replant them. So I'm just going to very gently, this little tool here, my bro got me for my birthday, get as deep as I can and just lift these guys up almost in a clump. And my goal is to not disturb the roots, or disturb them very, very, very little. So, doesn't mean they're going to take, it's not a guarantee. But to me it's worth a try. I have the space, I have the know-how. Let's see here. So we can see these plants, and once they're mostly taken out of the ground, I can very gently break them apart, and you can see their root system. Now, this is more tricky typically in container, in the ground or like in big containers, because the roots are getting deeper and deeper. It's easier to, just to repot stuff here. But to me, it's still worth it, right? So if I look at that, what people don't often realize is that the plant has roots, and the roots are connected to the soil, but the soil isn't the plants technically. So I can take this plant and I can plant it into new soil, and as long as everything goes okay, it could grow again. So I've got a little bit of soil in here, and I sifted it to make sure it's nice and good for these plants. And there's different tools, and I could use like a pen or something, but I'm just going to stick my finger in there for now and try to just gently place those roots down, deep down. And then here I'm going to hold on to these leaves, right, the ones that don't matter as much. I don't want to say that they don't matter, but not as important. And I can replant this cilantro. And plants are delicate at this phase, but also you'd be surprised. Things can kind of be moved around and shifted and changed, and sometimes people will be like, oh, my dog ripped my plant out. You can just put it back in the ground and usually it will survive. So now I have this cilantro. I always like to water it in, because what that does is it just sort of helps lock it in place. Also, of course, gives it water, which is necessary. Water it in, and just like that, I have another cilantro that probably would have just been taken out. Now I have another cilantro plant, and my goal is to have enough starts that I can share with my community. So yeah, then I pop this guy like so in here. I am pretty good at labeling everything, but when it comes to something like cilantro, I'm only growing one variety, so I just kind of let it be. I don't want to waste things unless I really need to. But yeah, I mean, look at these sunflowers. This is purple mammoth. I mean, huge, growing really fast, really starting to take off. It's exciting when you see things really start to take off. So I'm gonna keep working on this. I don't need to show you the whole process, but the more you understand plants and how they work and your connection to them, the more you'll realize that money does grow on trees, because you can seed some cilantro, and then next thing you know, you have a ton of cilantro, and then you save those seeds, and then you have more and more and more. So it literally recreates itself. So I think getting into gardening, when people are trying to save money and feel more connected to nature, it's a win-win.